Didn't we have a janitor schedule for after hours? Or are we letting mop girls interrupt press routes now? Mayor Brent Calloway didn't bother looking at her as he stepped into the executive elevator. He waved his hand vaguely, as if shooing away a mosquito. Layla Hughes stood still, her gloved hand resting on the mop handle, her cleaning cart stuck halfway in the door. "You're standing in your own reflection," she said quietly. The doors began to close, but a few heads turned. Mayor Calloway frowned. "What?" She didn't repeat it. "Subscribe now." This story turns the arrogant world upside down, and the reversal begins faster than you'd think. She stepped back, cart in tow. Her uniform was plain, faded at the shoulders. The mayor's staff, decked in tailored suits and expensive shoes, laughed as the doors slid shut between them. She didn't flinch. Layla Hughes cleaned the floors of a building that once engraved her name on a research wing. Now, they don't even let her share an elevator. But she wasn't here to be seen. She was here to survive, to keep the last thread of stability for her daughter, Maria, to do the kind of work no one respects until it saves them. And when it does, it always happens fast. Where are you watching from? Stick around. The man who mocked her will soon kneel before her. He just doesn't know it yet. Layla waited until the soft ding of the elevator faded, then pushed her cart into the marbled corridor. Mop bucket wheels squeaking faintly over the polished floor. Behind her, the bronze plaque still caught a bit of glare from the hallway lights. She wiped it with a dry cloth as she passed. No one ever looked at it. Certainly not the mayor. But Layla saw it every night. It still read, "In honor of Dr. L. Hughes, for excellence in pediatric emergency response research." Her fingertips hovered over the etched letters for a second too long. Then she kept moving. The graveyard shift always ran smooth. Fewer people, less noise. But Brent Calloway's upcoming re-election had stirred chaos even at midnight. Staff worked overtime. Media teams rehearsed in the auditorium. And Layla, like always, was expected to be invisible. Except tonight, she'd made a mistake. She'd gone to empty the trash bins from the upper floor, a route she avoided. The mayor hated reminders of lower staff on his level. But the junior janitor had called out, and Layla had quietly covered the task. And she'd walked straight into a trap, disguised as a routine. The mayor had been reviewing notes with his PR advisor. Spotlights, backdrops, everything calculated. Then she'd stepped into the elevator. Bleach on her gloves, sweat dampening the collar of her uniform. That one moment was all it took for him to belittle her in front of his staff. Layla had lived through worse. 2 years ago, her husband collapsed at work. Heart failure. The hospital paperwork drained their savings. Then came Maria's diagnosis. Then the layoffs. She'd taken the janitorial job because it was the only one that offered insurance within 2 weeks. They didn't ask about her doctorate. They didn't even ask about references. Just, "Can you clean floors?" Yes, she could, and she did. But that didn't mean she forgot who she was. She arrived at the south lobby and began polishing the entry railings. Light footsteps approached behind her. Young, maybe a child. She glanced over her shoulder. A boy, no older than 8, clutched a tablet in one hand and a juice bottle in the other. He looked lost. "Are you lost, sweetie?" Layla asked gently. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," the boy replied, standing stiffly. "Smart," she said with a faint smile. "Then maybe just nod. Are you looking for someone?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "My grandpa." Layla looked closer. The sharp chin, the eyes. Calloway? The child was his. She crouched beside him. "What's your name?" "Caleb," he whispered, cheeks pink. "I was sitting in the green room, but I followed the lights. Layla rose. Let's get you back upstairs, Caleb. She reached for the walkie clipped to her cart. She never got to use it because Caleb's body suddenly slumped forward, tablet clattering to the floor. His knees gave out. His breathing turned shallow in seconds. And no one, not a single executive in the building, knew yet that the mayor's grandson had just collapsed into the arms of the janitor he publicly humiliated. But Layla did, and she didn't hesitate. Layla caught Caleb before he hit the floor. His small frame was light, too light. His skin felt clammy, and his breath came in short, uneven gasps. She eased him down gently, laying him flat against the cool marble tile, her hands already moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times before. "Caleb, can you hear me?" she said softly, tapping his cheek. No response. His lips were starting to pale. His eyes fluttered, unfocused. Layla's mind snapped into a rhythm she hadn't followed in years, not since she walked away from the trauma ward. Airway, breathing, circulation. She loosened the collar of his little dress shirt, checked his pulse. Weak but present. She glanced around. No one had seen them yet. Not security, not staff, not even the mayor, probably still locked in a strategy meeting 2 floors up. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she murmured, pulling her cart closer. She yanked open the lower bin and reached beneath the spare gloves and bleach wipes. Past the cleaning supplies, she kept one emergency kit. It wasn't part of regulation, and no one had ever asked. But Layla had seen too many unattended emergencies. Too many kids fall through cracks no one wanted to see. A glucose gel pack. She tore it open and rubbed a small line inside Caleb's cheek. He flinched. Good. Reflexes were still there. She grabbed a water bottle from her cart's side holster, twisted the cap with one hand, and splashed a bit onto a folded paper towel to dab at his forehead. His breathing steadied. Not strong, but no longer spiraling. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the lobby. 2 interns rounded the corner, chatting, until they saw the scene. One dropped her coffee. What's happening?" "Get help," Layla said firmly, still crouched over Caleb. "Security, paramedics. Tell them it's an acute hypoglycemic episode. Probable type 1. He needs EMS now." The boy stirred again. She looked into his eyes. "Can you hear me, Caleb?" This time, his eyelids fluttered open and a thin sound escaped him. "Hurts. I know. You're going to be okay." He blinked up at her, dazed and scared. "I want my grandpa." Layla's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "He's coming." The interns scrambled down the hallway, yelling into their phones. A security officer sprinted past them seconds later, eyes wide. "Who? Is that the mayor's? Is he okay?" "He needs glucose and a proper IV," Layla said, without looking up. "Get the medics at the west entrance. It's closer." The officer fumbled with his walkie, relaying her instructions. People began pouring into the lobby. Aides, staffers, 2 senior advisors in suits, the city manager. And finally, Mayor Brent Calloway himself, his polished shoes hitting the marble like gunshots. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Caleb!" The child whimpered softly. Layla rose halfway, placing a hand between the boy and the crowd. "He's stabilized," she said calmly, "but he needs emergency care. He's not out of the woods." Calloway's face was stone. "What happened?" "Hypoglycemia. Sudden drop. Possibly missed insulin or skipped meal. You should check if there's a diagnosis you haven't been told about." He didn't respond. His gaze flicked between her, the child, and the gathering circle of eyes around them. "You?" he said slowly. "You're the janitor." Layla didn't blink. "Yes? You touched my grandson. I saved your grandson." The words didn't rise like a threat. They settled like a fact. Calloway looked down, then back at the people watching. His jaw tensed. "What gives you the authority?" "I had it before you were ever elected, sir," she said, her voice even. "And I'll answer every question you have. Later. Right now, he needs an ambulance." As if summoned by her words, the distant whine of sirens echoed beyond the glass doors. 2 paramedics burst in, wheeling a stretcher. Layla stepped aside as they swarmed the boy. One of them, a young woman, did a double take. "Dr. Hughes?" Layla exhaled quietly. "Not anymore." The paramedic stared a second longer. "Still, good to see you." She moved to assist, repeating Layla's earlier assessments to her partner as they lifted Caleb gently onto the gurney. The boy reached for her hand as Sarai. They secured him. Layla held it briefly. He didn't want to let go. She didn't speak until he was through the doors. The lobby fell into a hush. Layla turned. The mayor stood rooted, hands clenched at his sides, surrounded by silent staff who had just watched everything unfold. The janitor who wasn't just a janitor. The woman he mocked in front of cameras. The one who had caught his air before the marble did. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Layla bent, picked up her mop handle, and returned it to her cart. Then, without a word, she pushed it slowly across the lobby floor. Behind her, no one moved. Only the soft squeak of wheels and the smell of bleach remained. Until, somewhere behind her, someone whispered. She knew what to do. None of us did. And just like that, Layla disappeared down the hallway she was never meant to walk through. But now, they were watching her. All of them. For the first time. The hospital lights hummed overhead as Caleb Calloway was wheeled into pediatric emergency. His vitals were stable, but they moved fast anyway, faster than they usually did for VIPs. Word had already spread ahead of the ambulance. Mayor Calloway's grandson. Possible diabetic episode. Found unconscious. Saved by a janitor. Brent stood rigid in the waiting room, hands clasped so tightly behind his back that his knuckles whitened. His press secretary paced. His driver stood near the door, silent. But Brent's eyes stayed fixed on the double doors that had swallowed his grandson, as if willing them to reopen. "She didn't say she was a doctor," he said aloud to no one. "She didn't say anything." "Sir?" his aide asked gently. He shook his head, jaw ticking. "She just acted, like she'd done it 100 times. His aide didn't respond. "She used his name." "How did she know his name?" Another silence followed. His team was good at silence. They were trained for it. Trained to cushion his words, filter the damage, frame the optics. But this wasn't optics. This was something else, something rawer, something that clawed into the edges of pride and pulled. He turned to his aide. "Find out everything about her. Now." Across the city, Layla stood in front of the washing machine in the maintenance room at her complex, scrubbing her uniform with a stiff, bristled brush. The sleeve was stained from where she'd cradled Caleb. She hadn't spoken to anyone since returning home. She hadn't told Maria what had happened. Not yet. She'd kissed her daughter on the forehead, told her she was proud, enclosed herself in the small laundry nook with a bucket of hot water and silence. The brush scraped rhythmically against fabric. The stain was fading, but her thoughts were not. She hadn't meant to step forward. Not like that. Not in front of them. But she couldn't have stood by. Not with a child struggling to breathe. Her hand trembled for a moment. She gripped the edge of the sink and waited until it passed. She could still see his face. Not the mayor's, the boy's. The way Caleb's fingers had curled around hers. The way his eyes, glazed with fear, had searched for something, someone he could trust. And somehow, he trusted her. She leaned over the sink, letting the steam warm her face. The plaque, the one they all ignored. She should have walked away from it a long time ago. She didn't need their acknowledgement. She'd told herself that for years. She didn't need recognition or title. She had a roof over her daughter's head. She had her hands. She had purpose. But now the whole building had watched her, and she couldn't undo that. At City Hall the next morning, silence lingered where chatter used to live. The break room was still. The elevators whispered shut without gossip trailing through them. Everyone had seen the footage. Security had replayed it. Staff had passed it quietly, phone to phone, eye to eye. Some had watched it in disbelief, others with guilt, a few with awe. The footage showed it clearly. The moment Caleb collapsed. The janitor, Layla, dropping to her knees before anyone else moved. Her cart, her supplies, her hands, steady, skilled, intentional. At 8:05 a.m., the HR director called a closed-door meeting with the mayor's chief of staff. At 9:17, the mayor's executive assistant paused at the security office and requested a copy of Layla's employee file. At 9:38, the city manager arrived at his office to find 3 emails waiting, one from legal, one from communications, and one from the mayor himself. All of them contained the same 3 words: find her credentials. Layla arrived through the back entrance, as usual. No fanfare, no questions, no changes. But the stares had started. She felt them the moment she passed the front reception desk. People who had never noticed her were now stepping aside, holding doors open, nodding. It wasn't kindness, not yet. It was confusion, curiosity, and maybe something bordering on respect. She kept her eyes forward. She wasn't here to be seen. Maria had left for school with her usual bright energy. They hadn't talked about the hospital, about Caleb. Layla had promised herself she'd wait for the right time. But inside her uniform pocket, folded and worn, sat a note Maria had written last year. A child's handwriting, awkward and earnest. My mom is a hero, not because she saves lives, but because she still smiles when people pretend she doesn't exist. Layla touched the paper now as she waited for the elevator. She didn't smile, but her shoulders straightened slightly. The doors opened. The executive floor again. She stepped in, alone this time. The scent of polish lingered faintly. The same corridor where he'd humiliated her. This time, no one spoke. And when the doors opened again, she walked out. Not to clean, not yet, but to return a missing clipboard from a late-night intern who'd left it behind in the lobby chaos. She paused at the front desk. The receptionist stared. Ms. Hughes? The mayor wants to see you. Layla blinked. I'm on shift. He asked for you, personally. Layla hesitated, then nodded once, and followed the receptionist down the corridor that no one had ever asked her to walk. The mayor's office was quieter than usual. Layla followed the receptionist through a wide hallway, lined with photographs, ribbon cuttings, campaign trails, fundraisers. Brent Calloway's smile was the common denominator in all of them. Confident, manufactured, eternal. When they reached the double-glass doors at the end, the receptionist knocked once before pushing them open. He's expecting you, she said. Layla stepped inside. Brent stood alone behind his desk, sleeves rolled, tie undone. The usual entourage was absent. The polished oak table behind him bore no briefing folders, no catered coffee trays. Just a tablet and a single photo frame turned face down. Ms. Hughes, he said, voice clipped. She stopped 2 steps in, her hands folded in front of her. You asked to see me. I did. He motioned toward the chair opposite his desk. Sit. I'd prefer to stand, sir. This won't take long, I assume. He arched an eyebrow. You don't answer to me directly. No. But I also don't have time for theater. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Then it disappeared behind the politician's mask. He moved to the front of the desk, leaned against it, arms crossed. "You've made quite the impression." Layla said nothing. "Security footage has made its rounds. So has your file." He let the silence stretch, waiting for a reaction. He got none. "You know we don't allow unofficial medical response by staff." She met his gaze. "So you would have preferred I let your grandson die?" "I didn't say that." "You implied it." Brent's jaw tensed, but he kept his voice level. "I'm saying you made a decision outside your role. You could have been sued. You could have endangered him." "I didn't." Her tone remained steady. "He's alive because I knew what I was doing." Brent exhaled through his nose and pushed off the desk. He paced once toward the window, then turned back. "You were a doctor." "I am still a doctor. I just don't practice in a way that earns press coverage." "Why here?" he asked. "Why work here? Cleaning floors? Hiding credentials?" "I wasn't hiding anything," she said. "I applied for the job I needed. You hired me. That was the end of it." "But why not?" He stopped himself, gesturing vaguely. "Why not stay in medicine?" She didn't answer at first. The silence grew long enough that the question hung like smoke between them. Then she said, "Because your city's health budget closed the pediatric trauma unit I built. Because insurance red tape buried my husband before the doctors could save him. And because this building, your building, pays just enough to keep my daughter's medication stocked." Brent blinked. "You want to talk about why I clean floors?" Layla's voice didn't rise. "Let's talk about how many of your policies left women like me without any other choice." His mouth opened, then shut again. For the first time, Brent Calloway looked like a man whose lines had abandoned him. "I didn't know," he murmured. "You didn't ask." A quiet knock came at the door. The receptionist reappeared. "Sir, the city manager is here for the budget call." He nodded without turning around. "Tell him I'll be 5 minutes." The door clicked shut again. Layla turned to go. "Wait," he said. She paused, hand on the doorknob. "I owe you," Brent said slowly. "Not just for Caleb, for the truth you gave me about this place, about what it ignores." "I didn't do it for you," he nodded. "Still, I want to correct something." She tilted her head, wary. "I'm forming a community advisory panel," he continued. "Unpaid for now, but public-facing. It'll help shape healthcare funding recommendations. You'd be the first appointee." Layla stared at him. "So I can spend my nights cleaning up the building and my days cleaning up your conscience?" He didn't flinch. "So you can change things. So someone finally does." For the first time, her expression shifted. Skepticism, not dismissal, just the beginning of consideration. "I'll think about it. Take your time." Layla opened the door. As she stepped through, he said, "Thank you. For Caleb." She didn't turn around, but her voice lingered behind her. "I didn't save him for you, Mr. Mayor. I saved him because no child should suffer because of the grown-ups in the room." The door shut softly behind her. Downstairs, Maria waited in the side lobby, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Layla had called her during her break, told her to meet her outside. She didn't explain why. As they walked to the bus stop together, Maria looked up at her. "People are talking about you." Layla kept walking. "They talk a lot. It passes." "Not like this," Maria said. "My teacher played the video in class. Called you brave." Layla froze. "She did what?" "She said heroes wear all kinds of uniforms." Then she made everyone write about someone they admire. Maria pulled a folded sheet of notebook paper from her backpack. "I wrote about you," she said. Layla took it without speaking. They sat at the bench in silence. A new kind of silence. The kind that waits at the edge of change. Security Chief Howard Gelman rewound the footage again. The video played in silence, grainy but clear. The timestamp blinked, 11:17 p.m. The mayor's grandson crumpled to the floor, arms slack. 1 second later, Layla Hughes knelt beside him. No hesitation, no fumbling. Howard leaned forward in his swivel chair, elbows on knees. He'd seen hundreds of incidents over his years, running City Hall security, fainting spells, seizures, even one heart attack. Usually chaos followed. People panicking, shouting for help, crowding the scene like it was theater. But this? Layla didn't panic. She didn't even speak, not until she needed to. She moved like someone who'd done it before, who'd seen worse. She administered aid before anyone else in the frame even reacted. Howard hit pause and rubbed his jaw. The medical report had come through that morning. Acute hypoglycemic collapse. Responded to emergency glucose application prior to paramedic arrival. The paramedics had confirmed it. Whoever treated the boy knew what they were doing, probably saved his life. Howard exhaled and sat back. He clicked forward on the timeline again, watching the moment the mayor entered the frame. Brent Calloway, usually larger than life, suddenly looked small, sidelined by a woman in scrubs holding his heir's fate in her steady hands. And now, according to a memo he'd seen float through the administrative channels, Layla was being considered for a civilian advisory panel. Howard smiled faintly to himself. About damn time someone noticed her. He stood, grabbed the printed footage stills from the printer tray, and slipped them into a plain envelope. He didn't mark it with a name, just placed it in the mayor's internal mailbox with a note that read, "You should frame this, not bury it." Downstairs, Layla was scraping chewing gum from the underside of the atrium bench. The shift felt normal again, routine, almost. The building had quieted. The buzz was still there, but it moved like an undercurrent now. Less about scandal, more about myth. People glanced at her as she passed, but not with pity anymore, with curiosity, sometimes even with care. "Dr. Hughes," a soft voice called. She looked up. It was the younger paramedic, the one from the night of the incident. She wore civilian clothes now and held a clipboard loosely in her arm. "I wanted to say thank you." "Again?" Layla wiped her gloves on her uniform and stood. "You're welcome. How's the boy?" "Caleb? He's home. Recovery's going well. His parents are managing. The mayor's office is being very private." Layla nodded. "Good." The woman hesitated. "I knew your name from the old training modules. They used your case studies in my residency." Layla blinked. "They still teach your intubation technique," the woman continued. "We practiced it in simulation labs. You're a legend, even if they never called you that outright." Layla didn't speak. Her throat felt tight, like something unsaid had been waiting too long. The woman smiled. "I'm glad I got to see you in action, in real life." Then she walked away. Layla sat slowly on the bench she'd just cleaned. The mop rested across her knees like a baton passed between lives. It was strange, she thought, how quickly reverence could arrive once value was proven. How silence turned to applause only after performance. But she hadn't acted for attention. She'd acted because it was instinct, because children weren't political pawns. They were the only thing that still made this world bearable. Maria ran up 10 minutes later, after school. She'd brought Layla a sandwich in foil and an apple in a paper bag. "They're holding an assembly tomorrow," she said, dropping beside her. "Principal said they want to honor you." Layla arched a brow. "For what?" "For being awesome." Layla smiled faintly. "Is that the official language?" "Basically." Maria handed her the apple. Layla bit into it. It was crisp, cold, and just sour enough to bite back. "I don't know if I want the attention," Layla admitted. "Feels strange." Maria leaned her head on her mom's shoulder. "You don't need to want it. Just accept it. You earned it." They sat like that a while, Across the plaza, a news crew packed up their equipment. Someone had leaked footage from the lobby. The public loved it. David and Goliath with hospital-grade realism. The janitor who saved the mayor's legacy. Some called it heroic. Others called it humiliating. For the city that had overlooked her, no one called it nothing. That night, Layla finished her shift and headed to the locker room. Her cubby still had the same dented thermos, the same cracked photo of Maria in 3rd grade, the same black scarf she wore every winter. But there was a new envelope tucked into the corner. No name, just the City of Northbridge seal. Inside was a typed letter. Dr. Hughes, pending your interest, the mayor's office would like to formally invite you to co-chair the Health Equity Advisory Council. The position is consultative, with potential for permanent departmental leadership. We believe your insight is not only welcome, but necessary. There was a line at the bottom in pen. Please help us do better. BC. Layla folded the letter and tucked it into her bag without comment. The badge on her chest still read, Custodial Staff. But tomorrow, she suspected, that might no longer be the only title she carried. The auditorium smelled faintly of waxed wood and old carpeting. Rows of folding chairs creaked under the weight of half the city's employees, all murmuring softly as the mayor stepped up to the podium. His navy suit was sharper than usual, his voice slightly less polished. Layla stood in the wings, just out of sight. She hadn't wanted to come. She'd tried to decline 3 times, politely, quietly. But the invitation hadn't felt like a request. It had felt like the kind of summons you can only refuse if you're invisible. And she wasn't invisible anymore. Not after the footage. Not after the plaque was quietly polished without anyone asking her to do it. Not after she'd been asked to help write the next city health initiative. Thank you all for coming, Brent Calloway said, hands folded on the podium. Today isn't a press event. It isn't a campaign moment. It's something long overdue. A few heads turned toward the side of the stage, where Layla waited. The mayor continued. Last week, someone in this building saved a life. My grandson's life. Not because she was paid to. Not because it earned her anything. But because she saw a child in danger and moved faster than anyone else. He paused. She didn't hesitate. She didn't boast. She just did what needed to be done. Most of us didn't know her name before that moment. We do now. He looked toward the wings. Dr. Layla Hughes, would you join me? There was no spotlight. No dramatic music. Just a room full of city employees watching as a janitor stepped onto the stage. One hand tucked in the pocket of her uniform. The other resting on her daughter's bracelet, looped around her wrist. She approached slowly. The applause started before she reached him. It wasn't wild or frenzied. It was respectful. It held weight, the kind that builds, not bursts, the kind that says, we got it wrong. Layla stopped beside him, folding her hands in front of her. Brent turned toward her. I was wrong, he said. You were more than we deserved. And now, if you'll allow us, we'd like to make space for your voice. He gestured to the microphone. Layla looked at the crowd, then at the floor, then finally at Maria in the front row, smiling nervously. She stepped forward. I didn't come here to speak, she said, but I will. The room fell completely silent. I've been called a lot of things. Janitor, cleaner, ghost, sometimes sweetheart. Never by anyone who meant it kindly. A faint ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. But I've also been called doctor. I've led trauma teams, designed training programs, and helped rewrite field protocols. And none of that mattered here until a child stopped breathing. She paused. I didn't ask for your recognition. I asked for a job, a chance to take care of my daughter. I've scrubbed vomit off these floors. I've unclogged sinks in bathrooms with broken locks. I've been looked through by people who still can't pronounce my last name. Her voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened. But last week, I was seen. Not because I changed, because circumstances forced you to look closer. She turned slightly, addressing the back rows now. My story isn't unique. There are dozens of people in this building. Maintenance workers, cafeteria staff, clerks, who carry more than their title, who know more than you think, who've lived lives that would humble the most decorated among you. A quiet murmur of agreement moved through the custodial staff seated near the exit doors. I'm not here to shame anyone, she said. I'm here because someone finally asked me to step forward. And I'm going to. Not for prestige, not for politics, but because there are policies being written in rooms where the most affected voices aren't invited. That stops with me. She stepped back from the mic. The room stayed silent. Then slowly, it rose. Not a standing ovation in the theatrical sense, but a wave of people rising to their feet in acknowledgement. Custodians, IT techs, council assistants, even some department heads. Brent didn't try to speak again. He simply nodded and let the applause carry. Afterward, Layla moved through the hallway outside the auditorium as staff trickled out. Some avoided her. Others approached quietly. "Ma'am," a security guard said, tipping his cap, "my niece is studying nursing. I told her about you. She said she wants to be like you." Layla nodded once, offering a rare smile. In the parking garage, she found her cart waiting. She hadn't touched it all day, but old habits held tight. She began wiping down the handles, inventorying supplies, checking the mop wheels for cracks. A voice echoed from behind. "You know you don't have to do that anymore." She turned. It was Brent, alone. "I know," she said, "but it still needs to be done." He nodded. "I meant what I said on stage," he added. "You're not just a story. You're a voice. We'll follow your lead." She looked at him carefully. "I'll believe that," she said, "when change doesn't depend on emergencies." Then she returned to her cart. He didn't follow. She pushed it slowly down the ramp, back into the corridor she'd walked every night for 2 years. But today, something had shifted. Not the title, not the work, just the weight of how the world finally looked at her. Rain tapped lightly against the high windows of City Hall the next morning, a steady, polite percussion that filled the quiet. Layla arrived early, as always, badge clipped to her collar, uniform pressed and plain. But the halls didn't feel the same. They had never been loud, but the silence now held something different. Not emptiness, but awareness. People nodded as she passed. Some offered cautious smiles. A few looked away quickly, as if ashamed they hadn't known who she was until a crisis forced them to see it. She didn't hold it against them. Visibility, she had learned, was always conditional in places like this. She entered the janitor's storage closet to begin her shift. A new mop sat leaning against the shelf. Someone had replaced the old one without her asking. There was a new bucket, too, and beside the sink, a folded set of clothes in clear plastic, slacks, a blouse, and a navy blue blazer with a small embroidered patch on the pocket. City Health Advisory Council. She stared at it for a long time. No note, no explanation, just placement, quiet and direct, like an offering from the building itself. By 9 a.m., Layla sat in a third-floor meeting room with a dozen city officials, including 2 department leads and a trembling young policy intern who looked like he'd barely slept. The mayor wasn't there, which was exactly how she preferred it. They'd invited her to consult. She didn't like the word, but she understood the need for compromise. Power liked to preserve its illusion even when sharing it. Still, They listened when she spoke. She pointed out 3 holes in the emergency response framework that no one had seen. She asked how many staff knew CPR. No one raised a hand. She asked about the annual training budget. Someone shifted uncomfortably in their seat. When the meeting ended, she left with a binder under one arm and a list of direct action items the city manager had promised to review within the week. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, people watched her walk down the hall. Not for spectacle, for leadership. Later that day, she stopped by the nurse's office at Maria's school. The principal had requested a meeting, and Layla, still wearing her uniform despite the blazer in her locker, sat down across from a mahogany desk that was too large for the room. "We'd like to formally recognize you at the student assembly," the principal said, adjusting her glasses. "Maria's essay has become something of a centerpiece." Layla folded her hands. "I'd rather the focus stay on her." "She insisted we invite you." Layla blinked. "She did?" The principal smiled. "She said if we're going to talk about heroes, we should start with the ones who get overlooked." That evening, Maria sat cross-legged on the couch, textbooks open, pencil tapping against her cheek. "Did they like your ideas?" she asked, not looking up. Layla sat down beside her, setting the binder on the coffee table. "They listened." Maria smiled faintly. "Good." Layla reached into her bag and pulled out a slip of paper. "The mayor wants to hold a press conference next week." Maria wrinkled her nose. "Are you going?" "I haven't decided." "They'll probably want to put you on posters or something," Maria said. "Like City Hall's secret weapon." Layla chuckled. "Sounds exhausting, but kinda cool," Maria added, smiling wider now. "I mean, they know what you did." Layla nodded slowly. "Yes, they do?" Maria's eyes dimmed slightly. "You think they'll forget?" "They might, but you won't let them." Layla looked at her daughter. The way her shoulders squared when she said it. The quiet certainty in her voice. Not arrogance, not fantasy. Conviction. "You're right," Layla said. "I won't." That night, Layla returned to the building long after the lights had dimmed and the echo of heels on tile had faded. She walked the halls in silence, mop cart untouched. At the base of the lobby stairs, she paused. The bronze plaque had been moved. It no longer hung in the shadowed corner by the freight elevator. Now it rested beneath a lit display case, polished and centered, just below the new plaque that read, "In gratitude to Dr. Layla Hughes for the life she saved and the system she refused to let stay broken." Layla stared at it for a long time. She didn't touch it this time, didn't wipe away fingerprints or straighten the frame. She just stood there, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Then she turned and walked back toward the elevators. The doors opened. A young woman in a lab coat stood inside, probably a contractor from the health department. She stepped back quickly, recognizing Layla. Dr. Hughes," she stammered. "I just wanted to say, what you did." Layla stepped in beside her. "I didn't do it alone." The woman blinked. "My daughter kept me going, and so did a mop cart. And a badge no one read." The elevator hummed as it descended. When the doors opened, Layla stepped out. And this time, the building didn't swallow her presence. It made room for it. Layla stood at the edge of the press platform, wind lifting loose strands of her hair as the city square buzzed with activity. A podium had been set in front of the courthouse steps. Reporters clustered beneath makeshift tents, adjusting tripods and checking batteries. Bright microphones gleamed in the sunlight like expectant mouths. She hadn't said yes. Not yet. The invitation had come wrapped in formality, official email, stamped itinerary, security clearance tags. They wanted her to speak, to offer perspective as the mayor's chief of staff had phrased it. But Layla knew what it really meant. They wanted the symbol, not the janitor, not the doctor, the image, the miracle, the headline. She folded her arms. Across the plaza, Brent Calloway adjusted his tie and paced beside the podium, nodding politely to the press as they called his name. He kept glancing toward the edge of the platform, toward her. Maria stood behind her, leaning against a concrete pillar with her arms crossed. "They're waiting," she said softly. "I know. You don't have to give them anything, Mom. Not if it's not real." Layla turned slightly. "But what if I gave them something they couldn't twist?" Maria shrugged. "Then do it. But make it yours." Layla looked out across the crowd. The sea of polished shoes, open notepads, and camera flashes preparing to ignite. Then she stepped forward. Brent moved aside without a word, his posture still, his expression unreadable. She took the podium. A hush fell, the thick, anticipatory kind, like breath held across 1,000 throats. "No one asked me to be here," she began. "Not in the beginning." She looked at the cameras, then past them. "I came to this building as a last resort. I swept floors so I could afford medicine. I emptied trash cans so I could keep my daughter in school. I worked in silence because silence was safe." The wind tugged at the hem of her jacket. And then one night, a child fell, and everything changed. No notes, no script. I didn't act out of bravery. I acted because no child should be surrounded by grown-ups who freeze when it matters. That night wasn't about me. It was about what happens when experience is buried beneath assumptions, when credentials are ignored because they come in the wrong uniform. The crowd stayed quiet. Even the shutters had stopped clicking. I've been offered titles, platforms, apologies. But what matters to me is this. We are a city full of hidden expertise, quiet brilliance, unseen labor. And until we build systems that recognize that without needing a crisis to shine light on it, we will keep failing. She let the silence stretch. "I'm not your savior. I'm your reminder." And with that, she stepped back. There was no dramatic crescendo, no raised fist. Just the sound of applause rising from the street, hesitant at first, then gathering strength. It came not from the suited officials, but from the maintenance workers, the cafeteria team standing near the barricades, the mothers with strollers, the interns in the back who'd been afraid to speak. Brent leaned in slightly. "You dismantled the entire press narrative in under 3 minutes," he said under his breath. "Good," Layla replied. "Now maybe you'll build a better one." As she walked away from the podium, Maria joined her. She didn't say anything, just reached up and took her hand. That night, they walked home instead of taking the bus. The air was clean after the afternoon rain, and puddles glittered beneath the streetlights. The sidewalks were quiet. A few cars passed. Somewhere a dog barked in the distance. Maria held Layla's arm as they crossed the final intersection toward their building. "They're going to name something after you?" she said suddenly. Layla raised a brow. "A hallway, maybe. Or a clinic," Maria said. "With real windows and no rust. That'd be something. I want to work there someday," Maria added. "You know, be someone like you." Layla slowed. "Be better than me." "I don't think that's possible." Layla laughed, not loudly, but deeply. The kind of laugh that comes when your lungs finally remember they're not being chased anymore. They reached the stoop. Layla unlocked the front door, holding it open for her daughter. The apartment smelled like lemon soap and rice. Comfort. Inside, the answering machine blinked. Layla pressed play. A woman's voice. Calm. Clear. "Dr. Hughes, this is Senior Advisor Lang from the governor's office." We've been reviewing your work on the Northbridge response audit. We'd like to speak with you about joining a statewide task force. Layla pressed delete. Maria looked at her. You're not going to call them back? I might. Later. But not tonight. Why not? Layla opened the cupboard and pulled down 2 mugs. Because tonight we eat, tomorrow we decide. She poured tea. No speeches, no headlines, just a mother, and a girl, and a silence. Earned. The next morning came without fanfare. Layla woke before sunrise, the apartment still cloaked in soft blue light. Maria was curled up on the living room couch, textbooks splayed across her lap, glasses still on. She must have fallen asleep studying. Layla covered her with a blanket and paused to brush a stray curl off her forehead. There had been too many mornings like this. Quiet, tense, survival-focused. But this morning felt different. Not lighter, exactly. Just clearer. She moved through her routine as usual. Shower, toast, black coffee. But when she opened her locker at City Hall, the routine cracked. Inside wasn't her uniform. It was the blazer again, freshly pressed. The health advisory patch gleamed under the fluorescent light. A note was taped above it in fine handwriting. First meeting at 10 a.m., Conference Room B. Let's build the thing. RC. Layla smiled faintly. Rachel Cheng, the Assistant Director of Public Health, had been the only one to speak plainly since the fallout. She didn't flatter. She didn't pander. She just handed Layla city files like she expected her to know what to do with them. And Layla always did. She slipped on the blazer. The fabric was heavier than her uniform shirt, lined with authority, but she still wore her work boots. She liked the contradiction. By the time she entered Conference Room B, a group was already seated around the long table. Nurses, paramedics, 2 union reps, and a data analyst who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Rachel stood at the head of the table, motioning Layla toward the seat beside her. We're starting with emergency recertification for all admin staff, Rachel said, then restructuring the response escalation ladder. Dr. Hughes, you had recommendations? Layla sat. A lot. But first, we talk about pay gaps. The room went still. Rachel raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Layla opened her binder, flipped to the colored tabs she'd added the night before. If you want better response, you invest in the people who show up first. That means training stipends for custodial staff. It means wellness checks for overnight shifts. It means stop treating maintenance workers like a liability. The paramedic to her left nodded slowly. We've been saying that for years. And now, you've got someone on the inside to say it louder, Layla replied. Rachel leaned forward, smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. All right then, let's say it. They spent the next 2 hours carving into the system like surgeons. No PR polish, no vague promises, just operational pressure applied where it mattered. By the time they broke for lunch, the air felt electric. As Layla gathered her things, Rachel approached. You still sure you don't want the official position? She asked. Deputy director slots still open. Layla shook her head. Not yet. You're already doing the job. That's why I don't trust. The title, Rachel grinned. Fair enough. Layla returned to her usual floor that afternoon, stopping by the break room where she'd left a small cake on the table for Rosalie, the night custodian retiring at the end of the week. No speech, just frosting and thanks. Didn't think you'd still be down here with us, Rosalie said, cutting a slice. Why wouldn't I be? Because you're practically the face of the building now. Layla smiled. Faces change. Floors stay dirty. The 2 women laughed. Outside, the rain had returned. A gentle drizzle now, coating the glass walls and soaking the concrete. At 4:15 p.m., Layla made her way to the south corridor. The new children's wing of the City Health Outreach Center was under construction across the street. She stood by the window and watched the workers laying the foundation. They'd broken ground the same week Caleb went home. The mayor had named it the Hughes Unit in a press release. Layla hadn't attended the ribbon ceremony, but she'd sent Maria with a note. It said, "Name it whatever you want. Just make sure the medicine works." Behind her, she heard small footsteps. She turned. Caleb stood in the hallway, holding his mother's hand. He looked stronger now. Rosier cheeks, more weight on his frame. Layla knelt slightly. "Hi there." Caleb stepped forward without fear. "You were the one who helped me." "I was." He looked down. Then, as if remembering something practiced, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded drawing. It was crayon on school paper. A stick-figure woman with a long black braid, standing beside a boy with spiky hair. Above them, a speech bubble. "You're safe now." Layla took the drawing gently. "Thank you." Caleb's mother nodded. "We're grateful, and we're trying to do better." Layla didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned the drawing over and wrote her name. "Here," she said, handing it back. "You keep it, in case anyone ever tries to make you feel small." Caleb took it with both hands. As they left, Layla stood by the window again. Rain tapped lightly against the glass. Below, the foundation held. And for the first time in years, so did she. Friday came quiet, with overcast skies and the hush that only a city in motion can make. Layla arrived at City Hall just before the morning rush. The air in the lobby was dense with the scent of floor polish and coffee, familiar and grounding. She wheeled her cart toward the freight elevator, though today her shift was only partial. Half janitor, half something else. Again, she'd grown used to the double identity. The badge on her chest still said, "Facilities." But her name was spoken in different circles now. Health meetings, public records committees, crisis simulations. People had stopped asking why she was there. They'd started listening instead. Still, she found herself back on the ground floor that morning, where Rosalie's farewell was scheduled in the maintenance wing. No podium, no speeches. Just a folding table with a sheet cake and a few balloon strings taped to the wall. When Layla stepped in, the room quieted a little. Rosalie sat at the corner, wearing a sash someone had made from masking tape. It read, "Queen of the South Wing." Layla smiled. "It's not retirement if I don't get to mop behind you at least once more." Rosalie smirked. "Don't get sentimental on me now. You've got your blazer gig to worry about. I can still sweep when I need to think." They embraced, and for a moment, Layla felt the years in her spine, the fatigue of long shifts, invisible labor, days spent moving without being seen, the kind of tired that only eases when someone else who's carried it looks you in the eye and says, "I saw you the whole time." Someone passed her a plastic knife. Layla cut the cake. Rosalie held up her cup. "To every woman who carried more than a mop." The room murmured in agreement. No fanfare, just the quiet dignity of truth. Later that afternoon, Layla stepped into her second life, the one that came with spreadsheets and binders and the city seal stamped in the corners of every page. Rachel met her outside conference room D, arms full of folders. "The pilot program's moving fast," she said. "Governor's office wants quarterly benchmarks. Think we can have phase 1 by the end of next month?" "We can," Layla said. "But not if we keep pretending the city's emergency phone tree isn't broken." Rachel exhaled. "Already flagged it. I've got a contractor reviewing the dispatch center next week." "Good." They entered the room together. Inside were members of the newly formed Interdepartmental Response Board. Most were still learning how to speak across their silos. But there was progress. The meeting ran over. Layla didn't mind. She was used to long days. Afterward, she took the elevator alone to the rooftop terrace, one of the few places in the building where the city unfolded without filter. The skyline stretched in soft silhouettes, gray clouds casting everything in silver. She sat on the edge bench, her hands resting in her lap. Below, the traffic pulsed, slow and steady. Life continued. A few minutes passed before she heard the door open behind her. It was Brent. She didn't turn. "You're following me now?" "Only when I need reminding." He sat down beside her. For a while, neither spoke. Then Brent said, "We lost 3 minutes last week during a fire drill. Radio delay." "I know. Rachel told me. I want a solution by Monday." "You'll have it." He nodded, hands clasped between his knees. "You ever regret not taking the director role?" "I didn't say no to power," she said. "I said no to its habits." He smiled faintly. "Fair." A gust of wind moved between them. Brent leaned back. "You know, I always thought leadership was about control." Layla glanced at him. "It's about accountability." "I'm learning." She tilted her head. "Good." He hesitated. "Caleb keeps your drawing on his wall." Layla blinked. "He gave it back." "He made a copy," Brent said. "Colored it in. Said it reminds him that someone brave will always be nearby." Layla looked away, eyes dampened by the wind. "He doesn't need someone brave nearby. He needs to learn how to be it." Brent nodded slowly. A pause. Then, "There's a gala next month. Awards, honors, press. I'd like to name you Public Servant of the Year." "No." Brent raised a brow. "May I ask why?" "Because this isn't over. We're just starting. Give me the award when the dispatch system works, when the night shift isn't short-staffed, when emergency response includes every floor, not just the top ones." He smiled again, this time with a bit more wear in it. "That's going to take time." "Then don't hand me a trophy for being early." They sat in silence again, the city humming beneath them. When she finally stood, Brent did too. "You're the only person in this building who scares me, Dr. Hughes." She adjusted her badge. "Good." She walked toward the door, but before she opened it, she turned back. "Don't name things after me," she said. "Build them right. That's the only monument I need." Then she was gone. Brent stayed behind, watching the skyline. The clouds had started to break. The morning Layla found the envelope taped to her locker. The hallway was already busy with movement. Early maintenance calls, elevator inspections, 2 custodians trading coffee sips between rooms. The air smelled of disinfectant and old metal. The envelope was plain, unmarked. Inside, just a folded sheet of paper. She read it once, then again. The city council was calling a vote. A public vote. For the first time in 2 decades, there was serious momentum behind a measure to restructure Northbridge's emergency infrastructure. The motion included funding for basic trauma kits on every floor of municipal buildings, CPR training for all staff, regardless of role, and the formal elevation of Layla's Health Equity Task Force into a standing city department. The envelope hadn't come from the mayor's office. It had come from the clerk, which meant the council had moved on its own. She closed the locker slowly, the weight of it sinking in. No ceremony, no polished language, just the blunt truth. They were finally building what she'd been fighting for. Not because she had spoken, but because they had listened. And now it would come down to a vote. 36 members. Public session. Live streamed. She slipped the paper into her back pocket and went to work. By noon, word had spread. She felt it in the eyes that followed her, the way department heads glanced her way as she crossed the atrium. No one said anything out loud, but it was clear they knew the motion's name bore her. Fingerprints. Not her name, just her hands. At lunch, She met Maria in the courtyard between City Hall and the Outreach Center. The girl was already seated under their usual tree. Textbook open, lunch half eaten. "You heard?" Maria asked without looking up. "I did. They want you in the chamber when they vote." Layla sat beside her. "I'll go, but I won't speak." Maria frowned. "Why not?" "I've already spoken. If they don't understand it by now, they never will." Maria nodded, quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When I was little, I used to think heroes were people who jumped into danger." Layla smiled. "They are. But sometimes," Maria continued, "they're just the people who refuse to let things go back to normal." Layla exhaled through her nose. "Maybe that's harder." The vote was scheduled for the next day. That evening, Layla walked the north wing with her cart, checking supplies, refilling soap, tightening a loose hinge on the restroom door. It had become a ritual, one she hadn't stopped, even now. It wasn't penance. It was grounding. The work kept her honest. At the end of the hall, she found an older janitor kneeling near the vending machines, struggling to replace the waste bin liner with one hand while balancing his back brace with the other. Layla knelt beside him. "Here," she said. "Let me." He nodded wordlessly. Together, they fixed the liner. Quick, efficient, unseen. When they stood, he glanced at her badge. "You're her," he said quietly. "I'm just staff." He grunted. "No. You're what staff can become if people finally shut up and listen." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked on. The next morning, the council chamber was packed. Rows of spectators lined the gallery. Every news station in the city had someone inside. Cameras glinted. Microphones buzzed. Layla stood in the back, hands folded, blazer neat, boots scuffed. Maria sat 2 rows ahead, next to Rachel, who had a binder open in her lap but hadn't turned a single page. The mayor arrived last. No fanfare, no entourage. When the council chair called the floor to order, the room quieted instantly. "Motion 48C, the chair said. Proposal to restructure municipal emergency readiness protocols. Sponsor, Councilwoman Ellis. Co-sponsored by 9 sitting members. Open floor for final comments." A few council members spoke. Short statements, most of them acknowledgments of the motion's urgency. Then a pause. The chair looked toward Brent. The mayor stood, buttoning his jacket. "I don't need to summarize the proposal," he said. "You've read it. You know what's at stake. The only thing I'll add is this." He turned slightly, eyes landing on Layla in the back of the room. Sometimes, the most powerful reforms come from the quietest corners. This isn't just policy, it's course correction. And I urge this council to vote like you mean it. Then he sat. The chamber held its breath. The chair called the roll. Yes, yes, yes. One by one, names fell like dominoes. Layla's eyes didn't move from the speaker's desk. The final count came in. 31 in favor, 4 against, 1 abstention. The motion passed. Applause broke, not from the council floor, but from the gallery. Staffers, aides, community members who'd waited years for something like this. Layla didn't clap. She simply nodded once and walked out quietly, boots echoing against the polished marble. She didn't need to stay for the press conference. The work had already begun. The day the new emergency response policy went into effect, Layla returned to the lobby before dawn. No cameras, no ribbon, just quiet. The city's custodial team had received their first full day of cross-training the week before. CPR, AED usage, basic trauma triage. Every shift now had someone certified. And every floor, every department had a kit. Not locked in a closet, not reserved for managers. Accessible, useful, real. She moved through the building with her cart. though the mop remained untouched. She wasn't there to clean that morning. She was there to see what she'd helped build. The plaque still hung beneath the staircase, illuminated under soft white lights. It hadn't been defaced, moved, or quietly replaced. If anything, someone had added fresh polish around the edge of the frame. Maria had brought her friends to see it last week. She hadn't asked permission. She didn't need to. Layla paused beside the glass doors and looked out into the courtyard. A group of interns gathered near the benches, one of them reading a pamphlet titled, "Crisis Response Starts with You." It had Layla's audit system printed inside. She turned. The city's health equity department now had its own office. Modest, tucked beside public outreach, but marked with a proper sign and an open-door policy. Staff flowed in and out, tired, driven, sometimes skeptical. But they showed up, and she showed up too. Her badge still had the same name. The title had changed, not because she chased it, because the system had finally bent toward truth. By noon, she was seated at a long table in a Southside middle school gym, attending a community forum with teachers, nurses, and parents. No microphone, no press, just questions. She answered them all. When a woman raised her hand and said, "But how do we trust a system that ignored us until you went viral?" Layla didn't flinch. "You don't," she replied. "You watch it, you test it, you hold it accountable. And when it fails again, you remind it who you are." Later, she walked home. Not to a badge, not to a headline, to Maria, sitting at the kitchen table, building a science project with too many wires and not enough labels. "What are you making now?" Layla asked. Maria didn't look up. "A heartbeat sensor. I want to install it in public bathrooms, in case someone collapses and no one notices." Layla blinked. "You built that with household scraps?" "Well, and a little help from a grant Ms. Cheng helped me apply for." Layla moved to the table and knelt beside her. "You know this could help people." Maria smiled. "I know. That's the point." Layla exhaled, something quiet catching in her chest. She placed her hand over Maria's. The girl's fingers stilled. "I'm proud of you," Layla said. "I learned from the best." The rest of the night passed in comfort. Leftovers warmed on the stove. Tea shared between lines of solder and wiring. No awards, no visitors. Just the sound of two people building something that mattered. At midnight, Layla stood on the fire escape, looking out over the city. It was never quiet. Not really. Sirens still flared in the distance. Trains still rattled the edge of memory. The wind still carried stories between buildings like folded paper notes. But something had changed. Not just in her. In the way the world now turned toward the ones it used to ignore. The ones who showed up early, stayed late, cleaned what others ruined, fixed what others dismissed. The ones who never needed applause, only the chance to act. Below her, a new poster hung in the subway entrance. She hadn't known it was going up. It showed the silhouette of a woman kneeling beside a child. No face, no name, just 5 words. "Every uniform holds a life." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. She returned inside. Tomorrow would come. The fight would continue. But tonight, she rested. And for the first time in years, she slept without listening for the next emergency. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. "Beat me in swimming and I'll pay your debt." CEO smirked until the janitor dove in. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?